Isn't it? I was thinking the same thing, Jackie. Good morning, everyone, and hello to anyone who is joining us after the fact. As always, I'd love to know that you're doing that, just so we know who is participating in Bible study. Oh, here comes Donna. Great.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yay. Um, but just know that we are so glad that you are, in fact, following along. Hey, Donna. I don't know if you can hear us, but we're so glad you're here. All right, let us begin with prayer. And with less than a week to November 5th, this prayer seems appropriate. Let us pray. Grant, O God, that your holy and life-giving spirit may so move every human heart, and especially the hearts of the people of this land, that barriers which divide us may crumble, suspicions disappear, and hatreds cease in the fullness of God's time. That our divisions being healed, we may live in justice and peace through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. All right. Before we get any further, I just wanted to let you know that next Wednesday, I am helping at Washington Episcopal School with their All Saints Eucharist. So I won't be available to do Bible study. As you may know, we're trying very hard to cultivate and strengthen this relationship with Wes, which is our nearest Episcopal school. And so any opportunity that we have to do things together, I seize. So I apologize for that, but we'll resume the following Wednesday.
Win or lose, few of us will be sober anyhow.
Exactly. I was thinking about that too, although it would be nice to have a support group either way. But you all are welcome to get on the Zoom and talk to each other. I just won't be with you. Hey, Miss Donna, so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
How are you this morning?
Fine, thank you.
Yay, 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 yay. All right. Well, before we get going, I just wanted to remind us of where we ended up last time. Elin, am I right that we're starting at the beginning of 32?
I actually had it marked at the end of verse 42 in chapter 31.
Oh, okay. All right. I got so excited, I just kept on going. So we'll start there. So thank you. See, I always know that you will know, even if I forget to write it down. So, as you may remember, Jacob and his wives and family have left Haran and have headed down to Gilead. And we will pick up there today. And we will, as we move into 32, we will get to Penuel. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. So let me go back then to chapter 31. And you said we're picking up at 43. Is that
Well,
right?
that's what I have, but I did seem to remember that we'd finished. But in both my Bibles here, I'd marked it at the end of 30, chapter 31, verse 42.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
then,
I have the same thing, Elin.
okay.
Oh, okay.
You know what I think it is that, and I think this is exactly what happened. There is some duplication in the story in the Jacob.
Oh,
And
okay.
so
That's
we
what meant.
hear
Okay.
things again. And so I think I looked at it and said, oh, yeah, we've already read this.
Yeah, yeah.
So you all are correct. All right. Would somebody like bearing that in mind, would somebody like to read these 3 paragraphs so that we finish up chapter 31?
I'll do that.
Thanks so much, John.
Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do today to these daughters of mine, or about their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsfolk, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap. And they ate. Okay, I'm sorry. I got
Sorry,
heap, and they
I moved the.
ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jager Sahadutha, but I'm sorry, Laban called it Jagar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galid. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." Therefore, he called it Galid, and the pillar Mitzvah. For he said, "The Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from the other. If you ill treat my daughters, or if you take wives in addition to my daughters, though no one else is with us, remember that God is witness between you and me." Then Laban said to Jacob, "See this heap and see the pillar which I have set between you and me? This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness. And I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. May the God of Abraham and may the God of Nahor judge between us." So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice on the height and called his kinsfolk to eat bread. And they ate bread and tarried all night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban rose up and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he departed and returned home.
Thank you, John. You got some doozies of names to read. Um, so let's just look at the footnotes here. So Yegar Sahudutha means heap of witness, and Galid means, come on, well, we'll just do it this way, heap of witness. So the first is Aramaic and the second is Hebrew. And therefore he called it Galid, and the pillar Mitzpah. Okay.
According to mine, that is watch post.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Now I know exactly why I thought we'd read this before. Is I remember talking about the fear of his father Isaac. And so, but that obviously appears previously. Okay. So what do you notice? What do you hear? What do you wonder about in this end section of chapter 31?
Talk about eating bread instead of the animals they sacrifice.
Yeah, that leapt out at me too, Fred.
I saw this as consistent with Laban's character throughout. He comes in and says, "These are my daughters, these are my children, these are all my flocks. But, what am I going to do? Why don't we make a deal? You have your way, I'll have mine, and let's cut a deal right now."
I mean, this puts Jacob between a rock and a hard place.
Oh, you've been saving that one for a while, Fred. Groan.
Well, no, he's got, Esau mad at him in the direction he's going, and Laban not wanting him in the direction he's come from.
Exactly. So he's sort of cornered in a sense, right?
Well, he can go east-west. He just can't
Right.
go north-south.
Right.
Yeah, but
What else do you notice or wonder about? Are there any words you'd like to look at in the Hebrew?
I guess picking up on Fred's comment, and again, having read ahead, yeah, he can't go back north.
Yep.
There's only one place he can go, and that place may have some risk to it.
Exactly. But Jacob kind of made his own bed, didn't he?
Well, it depends. I mean, he is one of the only two grandchildren of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's going to be a mighty nation coming out of this, it's either him or Esau.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's,
Or else the children of Ishmael.
well, but Ishmael got sent away.
Mm-hmm.
The,
Although I guess, do I remember correctly that God told Jacob time to get up and go back to the homeland, or am I misremembering that?
Well, Rebecca kind of primed the pump a little bit, in getting him to move. Let's see.
she got him to leave, but I assume she's still up there hanging out with Isaac.
Isaac died.
Rebecca.
Let's see. Yes, it is God who says it. You're right, John. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and return to the land of your birth.
Take all your possessions.
There is no promise that he's going to survive that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's going back there just to be a sacrifice. And this particular iteration of God doesn't seem particularly careful about the details.
My study Bible says the story is built around an older tradition regarding a boundary covenant between the Arameans and the Israelites. So this seems to be a riff on some older folklore or whatever.
That's very helpful, Donna. And so in that sense, this could be an etiology, right? A story to explain why things are the way they are, why there is this boundary. Yeah, the word covenant jumps out at me. I'm just curious about the Hebrew there.
I mean, they made covenants all the time.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Right, but just hearing Laban and Jacob talk about this covenant just stands out to me. Come on. Oh, okay. I apologize for all the pop-ups as always. Really frustrating. Okay. Okay, so now let us make a covenant. All right. I don't know that that's particularly noteworthy there. Okay. Okay, what else?
Find it interesting that he has a continuing interest in his daughters, even married off and out of his immediate household, but he's still looking after their well-being long term and their relation to any subsequent wives added to the collection.
Yeah, what do you all think about that? Because we've talked a little bit about Rachel and Leah and how they're unusual among biblical women in some ways, in terms of their agency and their voice. Any other thoughts about that? Because of course Laban was manipulating them as much as he was manipulating Jacob before. So it is interesting that he is, still trying to control,
Influence, yeah.
influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably
Although
better.
looking at it from Laban's position, they all took off in the middle of the night.
Mhm.
There was no,
And his
Jacob
gods are
coming to
missing.
him and saying, "Look, I'm going back to my homeland. I've got the daughters, I married them. I've got my flocks. It's been great seeing you, but goodbye."
See ya.
Oh, it's cooler at
So-
night, John.
Well, but remember, Laban's gods are gone too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it could be feels like his divine protection of whatever.
His
Well,
household.
Patty, that's what I was going to ask, because here Laban leaves. I don't know if we ever hear of him again. Do we ever hear of the household gods again? Or is this the end?
I believe this is the end.
Hopefully she threw them out.
Well, she's still sitting, the last we saw, she was sitting on the camel and they were in the camel very cleverly. So yes, Rachel had them. Um, and I love that, the trickster woman who has some power, right? And so she steals the gods, and she hides the gods, and she uses her femininity, her womanhood, to thwart him finding them because she says, "Oh, it's that time of the month, and so I can't get up." And he's like, "Oh, never mind, stay away from you." And of course, she would be considered unclean, right? And so she uses her femininity, her womanhood, to her advantage. And I think that's one of the reasons I like that part of the story, because so many of the women either are shrews like Rebecca or voiceless. Someone was going to say something when I was on my rip. Sorry.
I wasn't surprised that he wanted to bid farewell to his. I'm not sure he's that interested in the daughters because they have no monetary value to him anymore. They're already married off, but those are his grandsons.
Yes.
And we know how keen they are to have their seed spread and have lots of grandsons and lots of descendants.
And heirs, right? And so that's a great point, Donna. And to that end, it would be in Laban's best interest for Jacob not to take any more wives, right? Because that would then dilute the inheritance for his grandsons. So that's a very good point.
So I have a question about the word witness throughout this.
Yes.
I mean, a witness, as I understand it, is like a person who sees something and is able to testify about the accuracy of what that person has seen. And I get how God can be a witness, to their deal, right? God's there. They, observe the deal, and okay. But they say that the heap is going to be a witness, and the stone is going to be a witness, and the pillar is going to be a witness. And these are inanimate objects. And is there something special about that use of the word witness to apply to these inanimate objects that we should pay attention to? Or is it just a sort of vague, poetic way of saying things?
They're inanimate, but they're
markers to
perpetual.
me.
Yeah.
They are going to be there, longer than the people who are, stacking them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the Hebrew here talks about the witness of people, but also, here comes Kim. The testimony, the evidence, almost the proof. So we'll put this here, as evidence. I think that's probably a better translation, is evidence.
I have seen in some pagan settings that they will have a heap like that or a mound and attribute it as a small g god. And so it apparently they sense that it has a spiritual content to it, even though it's a man-made inanimate object. That is something I saw in Africa.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And when I hear about these things, I'm thinking, yeah, this is it's possible that that pagan tradition goes way back.
Not just a pagan tradition.
It's a sign or a symbol or an indicator of the deal, right? That will outlast the people involved. Yeah.
But you go to national parks out west and people, sort of pile stones on top of one another to the point where they tell you, please don't do that.
Another way to put it in our terms might be that they have consecrated that heap and given it a spiritual content.
In the sense of setting it apart, right? I just want to pause and say, hey, Kim, glad you're here.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Sorry I'm late.
Never apologize. We're just glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else here? Did anybody, so on that point that Mark raised in verse 44, if you've got a different translation, I'm thinking about Fred who uses a different translation, or maybe Chuck and Jackie, what is used in 44 for let us make a covenant and let it be a witness between you and me? Do you have witness? Do you have another word there?
I have word for word what you just said, Patty.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Just
And then right after that, Jacob takes a stone and puts it down, and that's tied to the witness.
Does anyone remember in Europe, Jewish cemeteries, when people went to visit the cemetery, they put a stone
Mhm.
on the grave or something? I'm wondering if this dates back to this passage.
Hmm.
They still do it now at
They sure
Jewish
do.
cemeteries.
Yep.
Even here?
Yes.
And
Yep.
people put coins on stones at Arlington.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the type of coin denotes your relationship to the person.
Oh, I never heard
Really?
I've never
Yeah.
heard.
Yeah, I didn't know
That's
that. I knew about the coins, but I didn't know that piece about the different kind of coin.
I
Interesting.
forget the linkage, but you know, one coin says you served with him, another coin says you were in battle with him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
As a way to remember.
Hmm.
It is, I think, just a basic instinct to put something down to remember it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What is it that I'm oh sorry about my dog.
Squirrel, squirrel.
Exactly. Squirrel alert, everyone. Be very afraid.
She'll never rest in my neighborhood.
Sorry. What is the word? I can't think of it for what Ray was talking about with the stones piled up, or Fred was talking. Someone was.
Aaron?
Yes.
Aaron?
Aaron.
You.
Yeah.
I was
What's
getting
it called?
Cairn.
Karen.
Karen.
Cairn, I believe. Is the
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Thank you. I knew someone would remember. Many remembered. All right. Anything else here? What about that bread that Fred and I both noted? Jacob offered a sacrifice, called his kinsfolk to eat bread, and they ate bread and tarried all night in the hill country. Any thoughts about that? Is there significance to you in this context?
Maybe they hadn't been there long enough to have any meat.
They're traveling with their herds. You can go kill the fatted calf,
Yeah.
or at least the skinny one.
Yeah.
And he offered a sacrifice, so you would have thought there ought to be some burnt flesh somewhere.
Yeah.
I find that to be almost inexplicable.
Oh, breaking bread together is a bond.
Yeah. Let's just see what
They didn't add the
Alter
meat.
says.
There's a story.
It may not be, there may not be much to it, but wrong story. Okay. Let me do this. That's the wrong chapter. I had not done, hang on one second. I'll get 31 and see what Alter says. I used to have an actual book of Alter, and somewhere I've either given it away or it got lost in a move. It would be so helpful to have it instead of having to do this PDF. Okay, let's see.
I thought Ellie stole it from you.
She
No?
did. I'm glad you know that. Okay, here's what Alter says. Offered sacrifice and ate bread. The treaty vow is solemnly confirmed by a sacred meal. The term zeva refers both to a ceremonial meal of meat and to sacrifice. In effect, the two are combined. The fat of the animal is burnt as an offering. The meat is consumed by those who offered the sacrifice. As frequently elsewhere in biblical usage, bread is a synecdoche. I can never say that word, for the whole meal. In other words, it's like what Ray said, break bread. So it's symbolic of the whole meal. So interesting. I think it did have some bearing there. Okay, let me screen again for you. Okay, I hate to subject you to the chaos that is my desktop. All right, here you go. Okay, so Laban gets up, kisses all the boys and his daughters, and he goes home. Ready to go on to chapter 32?
Mhm.
Here we go. Okay. Who would like to read? Let's read, would someone be willing to do a big chunk, 1 through 21? Because it all kind of fits together.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Are you going to read it from your translation, Fred?
Yes,
Okay.
I can. Then I don't have to worry about you
Scrolling.
keeping scrolling or pop-ups or anything.
Okay.
So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, in the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, "Speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus your servant Jacob says, I have dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants. And I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight." Then the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is also coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him."
Uh-oh.
So Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that were with him and the flocks and the herds and camels into 2 companies. And he said, "If Esau comes to one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape." Then Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, 'Return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you,' I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth of which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude."
Can you
So
go
he,
to
yeah,
20?
so he lodged there that same night and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau, his brother, 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, and every drove by itself, and said to his servants, "Pass over before me and put some distance between successive droves." And he commanded the first one, saying, "When Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, 'To whom do you belong and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you?' then you shall say, 'They are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he is also behind us.'" So he commanded the second, the third, and all who followed him, and all who followed the drove, saying, "In this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. And say also, Behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me." So the present went over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, what's going on?
Bribery and corruption.
Same old, same old.
Well, I mean, he may have had faith in God, but he's still trying to buy his way out of it just in case. I mean, it's another, these people all, they talk a good game, but when it comes down to it, here, take my wife.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a Borscht Belt comic.
Who was it who used to say, "Take my wife, please"? Um, um, yeah, so let's talk about that faith in God. What does it mean for, at this point in the story, for Jacob to have faith in God? What does that translate to you in your minds? Anybody?
They are still at the period where they have a very transactional God.
Exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, and he's saying, return, God says to him, return to your country and to your kindred, and I will do you good. You do this, I do that. Quid pro quo. So, yes, very transactional. So it's probably less about trusting that God will provide or God loves him than it is, you know, just, doing what God tells him because he thinks he's going to get the goodies as a result.
Well, what if God is setting him up?
Hmm.
I'm going to send you back so that justice can be done.
Hmm.
Because I'm a God of justice too, remember, and you screwed up.
I don't see that in the text, though.
Yeah,
Oh no, I'm just
he's
free-forming here.
mid-rashing.
Exactly, filling in
My
the
own
gaps.
personal midrash.
Well, I guess I see it more as Jacob reminding God that,
Hmm.
Yeah.
hey, you said this was God. He's coming with 400. Remember what you told me. God, remember that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that, but should you have to remind God?
Well, if you're
At this time, you did.
Yeah, and if you're Jacob, who, remember Jacob's worldview is that everyone is out to get him. In this case, Esau is out to get him, but with good reason, right? Just because
Well,
you're
that was what I was
paranoid
going to say.
doesn't
They're
mean that
all
no
out to
one's.
get him, but they have reason to get him.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that no one's following you, right? So but he assumes that's his worldview, right? It's not a worldview about abundance. It's a worldview about, you know, get what you can while you can. And so he's assuming that God isn't going to fulfill God's promise. So back to your statement, Fred, about, if he had faith in God. Yeah, it's not so much a faithful thing, is it? It's just like, okay, as John says, it says here, you promised, this is it. And that's what I'm expecting you to deliver, God. Thank you very much. So it's in that sense, he's reminding God to make sure he gets his own. Sorry, Donna, was that you? Yeah.
And yes, I'm going back to Rachel and Leah. They do the same thing
You.
because they remind God that he hasn't opened their womb again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they even say he forgot me. He's forgotten about me. So I've got to remind him. So it's a very fallible kind of a God.
Mm-hmm. Or it's a, a person who doesn't yet, I mean, it could be both, right? A person who doesn't yet trust that God's going to do what God says God's going to do. It could very well be both. At the
Am
same.
I correct in reading subterfuge in here, and that Jacob is hiding half of his flock somewhere else where it's safe, and then taking a portion of what's left and making a gift out of it?
Mm-hmm.
And it will not be clear to Esau exactly how much Jacob has.
Exactly.
I would note too that God hasn't made covenants in a lot of these agreements. He's just sort of said, "Do this."
Mm-hmm.
If you make a covenant, you're bound to fulfill it. If not, it's like, telling your kid you'll take him to the zoo and then something comes up.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder how what Jacob is thinking in making this journey. Does he think of himself as someone who is going to be welcome where he winds up, or does he think of himself as a kind of invader, and he brings along with him some soldiers to make sure that he's protected along the way?
Hmm.
I get the sense that Esau is there with a whole bunch of people designed to do battle.
Mm-hmm.
But Jacob didn't come that way. He sort of expected that he'd be able to just walk in there and everything would be fine.
Talk his way in.
And
Bribe his way.
he didn't bring a whole bunch of soldiers. He didn't bring weapons. This is not an invasion. And the reason it's not an invasion is that God told him he would be welcome,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why bring along the soldiers and prepare for battle if you've got assurances from the Almighty that it's safe?
He's
And
taken
you
his
hedge
whole
the bet by the
household.
bride.
He's taken his whole household. Those are all the people he has to fight with.
What's interesting about that, though, back to Mark's point, in my translation, which is the RSV, the first part of the when you get started chapter 32, right there in the second verse, he says, Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's army."
Hmm.
Army.
And the translation here is it's God's camp. Well, army tells me, it's like Mark was saying, this guy has got, I'm here with the troops.
I'm here with the
Exactly.
troops, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Let's
there's
see
still a lack of faith.
Let's see what the
Well,
Hebrew says. Camp of armed host, army camp. Yeah. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Chuck, because we might not have gone back and looked at the Hebrew. So let's think of it that way. This is God's army. And he called that place Mahanaim, and that is a plural. Two camps. And so it kind of, and Alter talks about this, that throughout this whole story, everything is doubled, right? You have two camps, two droves of, or more than two, but you've got, dividing everything so that you can save some for yourself and then offer some to Esau. So there's always this doubling, which, could be because Jacob and Esau are twins, and so the doubling is always part of their life story. But it's also, Jacob is kind of two-faced, right? He's not straightforward. He's not transparent. There's always more to the story than meets the eye with him.
My study Bible mentions the doubling of the angels going up and the angels coming down as
Yeah,
another instance.
Yeah.
excellent.
Jacob's ladder.
Yep.
Patty, if you still have the Hebrew available in verse 9, I was intrigued by the "O God" and then "Lord." And
Yeah.
we talked about Yahweh and God and how they get used.
So God is Elohim, which is a plural. So it's, sort of the Godhead, gods, and that makes sense in terms of where we are in the development of the idea of the divine. And then Lord is probably, let's see, come on. Well, this shouldn't be such a cliffhanger. Okay, Jehovah, the existing one, or Yahweh. So the Hebrew here, it's Yod He Vav He is Yahweh. So we've got Elohim, which is more impersonal, and then Yahweh, which is relational. That's the easiest way I can distinguish the two, if that makes some sense. O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, and that's where it becomes Joey. Hush. That's where you're all safe from the squirrels. That's where it becomes a little bit more personal. So, what do you think about Jacob's strategy here?
Not taking any chances.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
covers his bases.
he's
Yeah.
sending his servants ahead,
Yep.
not, not showing up himself until he knows the lay of the land.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This story reminds me of a folk song that my grandfather used to sing. And it
Hmm.
was about a preacher. The preacher man ran into a bear and he went up a tree, and the bear standing at the bottom looking very menacing. And the guy sings, oh, Lord, who saved Daniel from the fiery furnace, save Daniel from the lion's den, save Jonah from the belly of the whale. Oh, Lord, Lord, if you can't help me, then please don't help that bear.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
I like that.
The bear doesn't need any help. They can climb trees better than people.
That was great. Oh my goodness. Anything else that strikes you about Jacob's strategy?
I think he's putting much faith in the protection of God.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, as you said, he doesn't leave anything to chance, right?
Mm.
It's the old trust but verify thing, right? Is that he needs to be sure that his assets are protected, including himself, right?
Well, God's promise to Abraham, he's still got his brother out there to fulfill that promise to Abraham.
Mhm.
So he is not guaranteed much.
Except he stole um, Esau's birthright and the blessing. So in his mind, he's climbed over Esau, and he is the one through whom this promise should descend. I know what I wanted to say. It goes back to what Mark was saying earlier about Jacob, assuming that he's going to be welcome and that he will be, this will be all fine. The text in this first paragraph or second paragraph here bears that out, because thus says your servant Jacob, I have lived with Laban as an alien and stayed until now. So that suggests that, yes, when he was up in the north, he was an alien. But now, as he comes down here, this is where he is welcome. That's how I hear that. And I think that aligns with what you were saying, Mark, about this idea that, he doesn't have to come in all defended. Of course, he's also got God's army with him. So,
Right.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, let's go to this last paragraph here, which is another famous moment in the life of Jacob. And I've got some art that will go along with that. Would somebody like to read this paragraph for us?
I could do that.
Thanks, Chuck.
The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and Jacob's thigh was put out of joint as he wrestled with it. Then he said, let me go, for the day is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall be no more be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, Tell me, I pray, your name. But he said, Why is it that you ask me my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, For I have seen God's face to face, and yet my life is preserved. The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of the thigh. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the sinew of the hip, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh on the sinew of the hip.
Thank you. Okay, there's a lot in this little paragraph here. Where do you want to start?
I don't understand who this person is.
Okay.
That they just automatically go into, I don't know, strife or whatever it is, you know?
It was a dream, wasn't it?
Hard to know.
Well, if he's got a limp afterwards, it was a pretty realistic dream.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like two kids. I mean, this is something you'd expect to see and did see in Tom Sawyer. The new kid on the block comes up and, one of the existing kids challenges him to wrestle or fight or run a race or whatever to establish his place in the pecking order.
No, it doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, you're a girl. You wouldn't.
Seems that God has kind of a vampire aspect, and day's breaking. I gotta go now. I gotta get.
Love it.
And what kind of God can't prevail against him and, right off the bat? Is he testing him to see how long he'll hold out?
Why does he call him Israel, and why does he confess that he's God? I mean, he's pretty straightforward. I'm God. Your name is Israel.
You're not.
And Israel means the one who strives with God, or God strives. Who might, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Who might Jacob have assumed this was at first?
Esau.
Esau. Yeah, it would make sense, right? Because it's dark, and the idea of, he's left alone. He sent them across the stream and everything that he had. So he is vulnerable. He's all by himself, and a man wrestles with him until daybreak. And this is such an interesting story, because do we read it on the literal level? Do we read it metaphorically, psychologically? There's a lot to it. What is this business about striking Jacob on the hip socket?
I don't know. Does it immobilize him? What was the point of that?
Left him with a limp. He's marked. But I don't see beyond that. What does Alter say?
Let's see. That is verse 25. Hang on one second. Come on. Oh, my screen is frozen, of course. Hang on. Does anyone have Alter up? Because I cannot. Oh, it is frozen and won't let me look at Alter. I'm sorry.
We're looking for it.
Okay, well, you're doing that. I will look in my study Bible, the NR's, the New Oxford Study Bible. It says hip socket or fleshy part of the thigh, injury to the reproductive organs is hinted. And indeed, with
a groin kick.
Yeah, indeed, with Benjamin already conceived, Jacob will beget no further children.
Oh,
That's
God finds dirty.
What's that?
God fights dirty.
Yeah, below the belt, right? Um, yeah. Did you find what Alter says, Chuck and Jackie?
Yeah, let's see. Uh, okay, he was limping on his hip. The encounter with the unfathomable other leaves a lasting mark on Jacob. The physical note resonates with the larger sense of a man's life, powerfully recorded in his story. Experience exacts many prices, and he bears his inward scars as he lives onward. His memory fleeing alone across the Jordan, his fear of his brother he has wronged, and before long, the grief of for the beloved wife he loses, and then for the beloved son he thinks he has lost.
Hmm. Oh,
Then it says, he goes on to this last verse. He says, therefore, the children of Israel do not eat the sinew. This concluding etiological notice is more than a mechanical reflex. For the first time after naming story, the Hebrews are referred to as the children of Israel. And this dietary prohibition observed by the audience of the story to this day marks a direct identification with or reverence for the eponymous ancestor who wrestled the night with a man who was no man.
hmm.
Hmm.
Oh, I like that.
Hmm.
So there's the linguistically switching the name from the Hebrews to the Israelites, the children of Israel, the children of Jacob, is a direct connection with Jacob. And this whole idea of Jacob, contending with God, striving with God, then becomes sort of the story of the children of Israel, the people of Israel, right? I like that.
As distinct from the children of Abraham, who include
Yeah.
Isaac and Esau and other people.
Exactly, exactly. So it's like the lineage is narrowing now, specifically through Jacob, which is interesting too when you think about Jacob's character and how he approaches his birthright, which is stolen. Um, excellent.
But,
Uh,
but what's the significance of fighting? I mean, why didn't God appear to Jacob and say, "Hey, let's dance," or let's sing a song, or write poetry, or I mean,
Worship me.
why the fighting? What is it? And if this really is God, what's the point of fighting against the Almighty God? I mean, you can't obviously
Can't
can't
win.
win. So what's going on here with the struggling, the striving with God? I don't get it.
Okay, great question. What do you all think? What is this signifying? Because I do think this story is meant to be read on multiple layers. Some stories, who is it who says sometimes a cigar is just a cigar? But in this case,
Freud.
it's yeah, Freud, thank you. In this case, it does seem that there is more going on to the story. So what is the significance of this wrestling with this unnamed man?
Metaphorical wrestling?
With his conscience?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm thinking he's wrestling with himself partly,
Mm-hmm.
and he's marked by it. It's such a struggle. And I mean, to think of wrestling all night in the dark by yourself, that takes such stamina and such courage that in a way he deserves a new name
Mm.
and a new relationship with God.
Oh, that's excellent, Donna. I oh, I cannot get I have some artwork I wanted to share with you about this story, and I think my computer is dying. It's doing this more and more frequently, and I'm so sorry. Um, mm, hang on one sec. I'm going to force quit. I may have to reboot Zoom, but don't go away. Hang on. Okay. Oh, good. You're still here. Yay. All right. Now let's see if it will open up. Stop share. You all are so patient as I sort this out. Okay. Hang on. Is it coming? Is it coming? I think it is. Hang on. Yay. Okay. I will share again. Yes. All right. Not to be thwarted. Okay. So I've got some art about this story that I wanted to share. All right. So first, this sculpture by Jacob Epstein. What do you think about this?
It's like they're kissing.
Yeah.
Very close contact.
Oh.
Pretty intimate, I would say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it to
Art
me,
gets a little like they're dancing.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it almost looks to me like the angel's holding Jacob up because Jacob's arms are kind of limp.
Yeah.
And the angel looks like he's about to stand up straighter. So there's that. And
We know
then,
which one's the angel.
well, the one
Yeah,
with the wings.
how did God become an angel suddenly?
Don't see him.
Well, and the story is usually known as Jacob wrestling with the angel because it is an embodied figure, right? So if an angel is a messenger of God, that it's a manifestation of God. So yeah, here are the wings here. It's very solid looking, right?
Those are wings?
Yeah.
I thought he was just against a wall or something.
I thought that too.
Maybe, except that so you're suggesting that the wall is part of the sculpture? I see.
Well, if they were on the ground, but then there would have different mechanics. I don't know.
I don't know either. Good question. Above our pay grade. All right, here's one. This is Gauguin. Whoops. Gauguin's version, this painting. And you see here it's very clear that there's an angel. And who are these women? We don't know.
Yeah.
They're
The Handmaid's
watching.
Tale.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
handmaidens.
yeah. And it's interesting that they are all in the foreground and this wrestling is happening over there. And then here is 1920 Max Beckman, Jacob wrestling with the angel. I don't know what you see here.
There's the ladder.
There's a ladder. Yeah.
Ladder. Yeah, exactly.
Did the angel come down on the ladder, or was Jacob trying to climb the ladder?
Or is the ladder just there as a reminder of Jacob's dream? It could just be a symbol. So which one's the angel and which one's Jacob?
The angel is on top. He's got an
Yeah.
aura or a
Mm-hmm.
glory around him.
Yeah.
And look at what's Jacob doing?
Clinging to the angel.
Holding on to him, won't let him go away.
Yeah. And that's very consistent with who he's been since birth, right? Because he comes out of the womb holding on to Esau's heel. And so he's always striving. And so here he is now wrestling with the angel. Let's see if I can go back. Let's look at the Epstein again. Does this version illuminate the story at all?
Angel supporting him.
Yeah. It's almost, to me, it's almost like Jacob gives up because of the way his arms are.
Mhm.
And the angel holds him up or supports him. Now, again, bearing in mind that every artistic representation is an interpretation, but that's what we're doing too in Bible study, right? We're hearing the word and we're interpreting it in our context and trying to figure out what it means for us. So going back to Mark's question, why the wrestling with the angel? Why not
Well,
dancing?
as far as contests are concerned, I
Mhm.
can't think of anything that's more close,
Hmm.
where body to body.
Yeah. And it's and I've no, I've never wrestled, but I would imagine that in wrestling, the two opponents have to be somewhat evenly matched. I know that weight is important, right? You have to wrestle in your own, compete in your own weight class. So there's something about the parity almost between the two. Um, and it's very close, it's very physical. Any other ideas about that?
Yeah, it's just a puzzle. I mean, I'm thinking of Saint Teresa of Avila and her experience of God,
Hmm.
which is also an experience of an angel, and
Mhm.
it's sort of sublimated sex. I mean, she's describing how the angel pierces her heart, her
Yeah.
entrails with the arrow, and the pain is so sweet that she felt as though she would die of the pleasure. Um, and Bernini made this great sculpture of it, the ecstasy of Saint Teresa, where she's thrown back in this physical ecstasy. And that's an impression of an encounter with God. To be honest, it strikes me as being a much more attractive and desirable
Yeah.
encounter than a fight.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, become a Catholic. This is what you'll experience.
Exactly.
Oh dear, we're all in the wrong faith.
All the same faith, just a different expression of Christianity.
Okay.
Well, let's
Gotcha.
let's run with that because I think that's great, Mark. So this idea of Teresa of Avila, that's a much more appealing um, encounter with God. The idea of pleasure and ecstasy and sexual fulfillment and all of that, as opposed to in this, if the footnote in my Bible about basically kicking him in the groin is to be believed, and there's something about ending fertility, right? And ending that pleasure, or at least he's going to be in pain for a while. Um, and so he's got all of these children already. What is that about? It's very interesting, this story, in terms of, and he comes away not only with a limp, but with a new name, with a new identity. And it is through him that future generations will have this connection back to the promise. Um, so what do you make about all that?
I still don't understand the wrestling, but I do see this as the counterpoint to his first dream, where God shows up, doesn't wrestle with him, just shows up. I'm here. Here's my promise to you. Jacob said, and you go away, and when you come back, everything will be fine. I make sure you come back fine. And Jacob says, well, if he does that, he's going to be my God at that point. And so here he is coming back. And again, I don't, other than to put the focus truly on Jacob as the progenitor of the Israelites. I don't understand what the little wrestling story is about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, um, to me, it does make a lot of sense because, as you pointed out, Patty, I mean, when you think of all these stories and novels about lives of people, but this one starts from the womb.
Mm.
And he's trying to pull his brother back, I guess, in. I mean, if he could, he'd pull him all the way back in and he'd pop out himself first. And everything has been a struggle for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's had to do things by trickery. And all along, he's had to negotiate and he's had to be clever and fend for himself and think for himself. And his whole life has been this struggle to realize what that covenant would mean to him. But he isn't passive. He's a struggler all through his life.
Mm-hmm.
And then this wrestling is a perfect metaphor for the continued struggle he has.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he struggled so much. His mother set him up, and told him what to do.
Well, in the birth
Then-
narrative,
To steal the blessing, to steal the birthright. Well,
Yeah,
I
but
guess
then he
not
had
the
to put up
birthright.
with the consequences.
and just remember the narrative about the twins' birth says that Jacob was grabbing onto Esau's heel, and that's how he gets his name, right? And so there is something, I guess it's nature versus nurture, right? Is this who he has always been? Or is it that circumstances have required this? Maybe it's both. But going back to what Donna said, what's interesting is when God says, or the angel says, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed. So it's almost as though here's your gold star, which is interesting. Yeah, you wrestled with me and you got your way because I'm giving you my blessing. I won't let you go. So Jacob is, maybe he's a seeker. Maybe he is desperately trying to figure things out to get what he thinks is his. And God says, okay, I will give you the blessing. You're gonna limp as a result. You're gonna be marked forever, and you're gonna get this new identity, but you're gonna get the blessing. So it's a both and.
It seems to me that he is the poster child for the saying, the Lord helps those who help themselves.
Helps himself, doesn't he?
He's helping himself to everything he can find.
Exactly.
Yeah, a little
You
bit
could say the same
overboard.
for Putin.
That was wonderful. I love that. Oh dear. Well, we're past time. So what I'm going to suggest is let's pause it here at the end of 32. And I do have a website that I just couldn't share with you because my computer is not cooperating, but I'll send you the link. And it talks about each of those pieces of art and how they depict this moment in Genesis. And so maybe we'll pick up with that on the 13th. So just a reminder that next week we won't meet, but we will pick up on the 13th. And let's spend a little bit more time with Jacob wrestling before we move on. But Donna, I think you get the last word. That was the best. God helps those who help themselves. Yes. That's the summation of Genesis 32 right there.
Okay.
And Puck is with us. Hi, Puck. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bathed in sun. Does everyone notice the sunbeam in Puck right there in the middle of the sunbeam in Chuck's? All right, thank you all.
Mark, I'll
Fabulous
see you in about half
discussion.
an
Thank
hour.
you.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you,
Bye.
Patty.